that if you, the people, tell me on August 8th that you want fresh leadership, I will humbly stand aside and ensure a respectful and peaceful transition of power, and I urge my successor to love and care for this great nation as I have tried to do. Ladies and gentlemen may recall that in 2002, when I lost the elections, I conceded long before the vote count was even completed. That action ensured a smooth transition. I am proud of that record of conceding, and I urge, or maybe even challenge, my competitors in this year's contest to pronounce themselves on this matter unequivocally. No buts. Just commit to ensure peace and accept the verdict of the majority of Kenyans. I did it, and I waited for 10 years for another chance, and here we are. I also urge all politicians contending for the highest honor of representing not just your constituency, but your people and your country, to ponder the values such an individual should exhibit. I urge all contenders in this election to conduct themselves with the humility and decorum that public office not only demands of its actors, but desperately needs if we are to continue to grow as a nation.
But the pattern begins with the electoral body allowing incumbents to usurp its role and turn themselves into referees in matches they are playing in. This pattern has begun again. The IEBC must nip it in the bud now before it leads us to the abyss in August. Credible elections are about processes. They are about registration of voters, access to polling stations, casting and counting of ballots, and declaration of results. All these processes need to be credible, trustworthy, consultative, and inclusive. In this election, the concerns of the opposition have been ignored in one of the most critical aspects of these stages, and that is the printing of ballot papers. We are also deeply concerned about the determination of the IEBC to change the law regarding declaration of presidential results. We recognize that the courts are currently seized of this matter. 3 days ago, the IEBC ignored our concerns and the findings of the court and re-awarded the tender to Al Ghurair Printing and Publishing Company. This development is ill-advised and unfortunate. It casts a dark shadow which could have been avoided over the credibility of the August elections. There appears to have been a clear determination by the IEBC to award this tender to the Dubai-based firm no matter what. Information currently in our possession indicates that the firm has long had contact with senior Jubilee officials for at least 3 years. Owners of this firm hosted senior Jubilee officials in Dubai in February last year, during which the ballot printing tender was discussed.
And that's where we kick off our tour of Citizen Extra with, those two quotes from President Uhuru Kenyatta, who said that he is willing to accept the results of this election and to concede no buts if Kenyans were to vote another way come August, and challenging the opposition to be willing to make a similar pronouncement. And then later, of course, we've heard from the NASA flag bearer, Raila Odinga, raising concerns over the award of the tender on ballot papers to the Al Ghurair printing firm. And we want to begin on that note. I'll introduce my guest to you this hour. Igembe South legislator Mithika Lituri is with us. Homa Bay Town MP Peter Kaluma also joins us on the program this hour, and we're staying with Michael Agwanda, who is a political analyst. So welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Peter, in particular on the concerns that Raila Odinga has raised, the NASA flag bearer, in regards to this award of the tender. What are the substantial issues that NASA is challenging in as far as Al-Ghurai's tender is concerned? Because this is about really the printing of ballot papers, and when NASA talks about the credibility of the election and correlates it to the award of this tender, then one wonders to what extent such a firm would be able to influence at all the outcome of the poll. So break it down to us, the concerns surrounding this tender award.
Yes, and you remember when we had the elections in 2013, the results for all seats other than the president were the same. It is now on record and it has been confirmed by the IEBC's own report that if you looked at the total vote tally for MCS, you looked at the total vote tally for all senatorial candidates, you looked at the total vote tally for all gubernatorial candidates, you looked at the total vote tally for all women representatives and members of parliament in the National Assembly, they were coming to about 10 million voters. In fact, it was 9-point-something, nearly 10 million voters. But the presidential vote, to the contrary, was 12 million votes. And you remember, Anne, and all Kenyans would agree with us, that anybody who went to vote at the polling stations was given 6 ballot papers to, cast at the same time. And you also know that the law says any ballot paper which is unused is to be kept and unsecured for production in litigation processes, and none of those were there. So that I'm bringing this fact to confirm to you that we are not just dealing with printing of ballot, but we are saying when you are engaging a firm to print ballot, we must secure that it will only securely print the number of ballot papers that need to be used. More so, if there is the possibility that people can revert to, manual voting, system in particular, instances where you remember ABC is currently saying that, the electronic system may fail. And now, having come from that, and with that background, you now go into, the contracting, for the ballot printing this time. And I want to remind you that challenges have been mounted against Al-Ghurai at different judicial fora. The first challenge was before the Public Procurement Appeals Board, which said, this tender, which was initially an open tender, the grant of that contract made to Al-Ghurai's should be cancelled. The thing then went to the High Court. The High Court upheld that position. Al-Ghurai's went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal said that award ought to be reversed. What we are saying now is that when IEBC moves from open tender, and instead of going for even a restricted tender in which the top 5 in the initial open tender would be considered, they decide to go choosing Al-Ghurai. Essentially, they are confirming that they are hell-bent and they have an ultimate determination that it must be Al-Ghurai. So it brings the suspicion and the question, what dealings could have there been between Al-Ghurai and IEBC? And these are, of course, hazy, and they need to be looked into when we go into an important matter of election. But
okay, but Peter, I want to shed light on what you've said, because I don't think this has been properly captured before in what NASA is claiming. You're saying that your fear is that this particular firm will print more papers than those that are required, and that surplus will then be used to influence the outcome of the poll.
I'm saying that is a possibility. The other possibility is that the tender printing monies could have been inflated so that people benefit for their political purposes here. But I'm saying all these are possibilities. And that is what is bringing me on to the last point I was going to give you.
Right.
That remember, tied to that, the flag bearer for NASA is saying there have been meetings involving very top leadership of our competitors, Jubilee, in these elections with Al-Ghurai. Are these claims and you want to approach elections with, you want to proceed printing ballot papers with, without them being addressed?
No, I think certainly nobody wants that, which is what brings me to my question is that we have heard, you know, several claims from the opposition regarding the credibility of this poll, leading up to this particular issue of, you know, the alleged meeting between top Jubilee officials and the officials of this firm before even the tender was awarded. Where is the evidence to back that? And if you have it, why not just come out openly in the public and say, we know that this particular individual in Jubilee met this officials on this date, produce the evidence, then we're discussing a substantial matter when it comes to, you know, the printing, the award of this tender. But beyond that, one would be, you know, I mean, it would be hard to convince the public that, you know, NASA is not just bringing up allegations for the sake of and trying to derail this particular process.
Correct. On elections, it's an important matter, and I want to assure you that NASA is not the coalition that will be bringing issues about jolting the electoral process, because this thing is as good as one. What we are saying, and what you see our flag bearer was saying, is that really create a forum so that we can interrogate and resolve these issues openly, so that we go into the elections believing it will be free, fair, credible for all.
What forum is required? What forum is required for you to tell the truth that, you know, if indeed NASA has the evidence that a top Jubilee official was involved in, you know, basically pushing through this particular tender award, and given the veracity and the seriousness of the concerns that you have, is it not prudent and in public interest to just come out and say it?
There must be a forum at which you give what you call, you know, this tangible evidence. Remember, when it was open tender, you have the leeway to go to the appeals tribunal and you lay your evidence there. If it is direct tender, there are restrictions. But I can assure you, it being a direct tender now, you remember Parliament was just passing the 2.5 billion advance request from IEBC to facilitate this ballot printing 2 days ago. If it is at that situation,
right,
then what we are going to do is to see whether people can go again to the appeals tribunal or back to the courts, so that you have a forum at which you are not just dealing with the public, but you have material and ultimately a determination that can bind the process. But I think, in as much as you are saying evidence is not being given, you hear the flag bearer of NASA being very explicit. He's telling you even the dates, the months when meetings took place and who they involved. What you now need to do is to create a forum at which evidence on who in Jubilee is this who is connected to Al-Ghurair.
Who needs to create a forum? The court system is already in place. So if you have those names, as you've just rightly mentioned on this show, why not go to court and produce that evidence before a court that can make a determination on this matter?
I assure you, Anne, that is an option. And if it is the ultimate option to be taken, we would take it. Save that we were saying IEBC should do the right thing when they know it is wrong. You remember court processes have also the danger of delaying processes, more so for elections taking place in less than 2 months away. So we are telling IEBC, if you can deal with these matters in terms of, you know, doing what is right, do it. If of course they don't do it, then I assure you, Anne, it is not a matter NASA will take lightly. We will go to whatever forum these matters can be dealt with, but we will not go into elections with the potential of being rigged again.
All right, and Peter, I appreciate your clarification on your position on the, you know, the award of this tender. Mithika, let me come to you, because those are allegations that are very serious, that the opposition coalition is launching against Jubilee, and if in fact proven true, then this would be a major election issue. What's the position of Jubilee?
Thank you, Anne. And first, let me start by saying that the NASA principle of flag bearer and Mr. Kaluma and the entire NASA fraternity is unnecessarily apprehensive. I'm saying it's unnecessarily apprehensive because they are worried for no apparent reason, as far as I am concerned, because when you look at their composition, when you look at them, they are people that have capacity to determine
or to differentiate between facts and propaganda. And because, you know, these are people that have perfected the art of propaganda and lies, they have to move to that mile to try to create a picture or an impression that the election will not be free, fair and transparent. And with the undue respect to Mr. Kaluma, and Kaluma, a guy that I really respect, and whose book that I read and made me pass administrative law when I was doing my law degree, I want to remind him on what he wrote in his book, that when a public body makes a certain decision and then you are not satisfied and you must question the decision of that public body, then you go for judicial review. And it is Kaluma that wrote, and I read his book, and whatever, if anybody is dissatisfied with the decision that was taken by INBC, then that is the process that should have been taken to ensure that all the issues that we cannot canvass on television and where we would require an impartial arbiter would be able to get to know the truth. And I appreciate, I've not been following up this process, but I appreciate that somebody or some people trying to go and question their award of tender to Al Ghuraira, because I've heard Kaluma saying it went from the review board, it went to High Court, and I don't know where it ended. Those are part of the processes that are generally used. I think the question on what is being tried or what has been tried in those judicial forums in terms of trying to address this matter is what, in my view, should be the issue that we must be cross-examining, or we must be trying to understand the truth, because that will be based on matter of substance. And the procedure that was used has also been questioned, then we must leave the courts to make a determination on whether the process was fair. If the process was not fair, then they have liberty to cancel. But I would also want to say here that if indeed the process has gone from the Judicial Board to High Court to the Court of Appeal, and they have found that something was wrong, and being elections being as emotive as they are, then in my view it would be wrong to just pick Al Ghuraira and give him the tender. That would have, not that legally it would be wrong, but depending on what the issues, because the procurement law gives processes or gives different ways of procurement: open tender, selective bidding, direct, and even if you are to go for direct, then you must justify why you are using that process.
So Mithika, let me cut you short, because that is exactly what happened.
Please allow me now.
No, sir, because this can't just be prose. You must be interrogated on what you're saying. So because it went to court, it was cancelled. IBC, no sooner was it cancelled, awarded the tender again to the same firm. Must they come out in public to declare why it is they gave it back to Al Ghuraira even after the court had a say on this matter?
Let me say that, you know, public institutions have a duty. Public officers have a duty, and state officers have a duty to be accountable for the decisions that they make. I think specifically when you look at what is provided for under Article 232 of our Constitution in terms of responsibility of public officers and duties. So when a decision has been made, and in fact the law says that when you take up a decision to do something, then you must communicate that decision to that particular body and even do it in writing, so that people know. So understanding the environment under which elections being concerned, in my view, it will not have asked anybody to say we have decided to give Al Ghuraira this tender because of the following reasons. That will settle people that have suspicion and would have made them understand why such a decision had to be made.
Right.
I do not want, and please allow me say this. One thing that I do not agree with is the aspect that probably, or the fear that Kaluma and his team has, that because Al Ghuraira was given the tender, he can probably print more ballot papers and give them to Jubilee. That could be a possibility. I am being objective. That could be assuming that can be a possibility. And if it is a possibility, because INBC is charged with the responsibility of ensuring a free, fair, transparent election, then we must ask ourselves, Does Jubilee have that capacity to introduce ballot papers to influence the outcome of election in all the polling stations in this country? That's a question that can be answered. And I know all these ballot papers that will be done will have a serial number. For example, where I vote my constituency is 051. My polling station is 071. I would assume that the serial numbers for these ballot papers, for example, in my constituency will be 051, 071, the polling center, and the numbers. Because every booklet may have 10, 20, or 50, depending. And if that is the case, and understanding that voter identification will be biometric,
right?
And people have to get identified. And I am told from the law that whenever anybody is identified as a cast his vote, there will be transmission into a center in NBC in Nairobi, trying to work out on the numbers that will have turned out for elections. And these numbers will be compared amongst or along the ballot papers that will have been basically cast in all these places. In my view, it's a necessary fear that there is, because the process of this election fear will be the most, in my view, and the systems and the institutions that are participating in this election have the sufficient law to ensure that the process will be free, fair, and transparent. We have a responsibility as the voter, even where we have a problem. Please, when you go to that voting center, make sure nobody gives you a different two ballot papers or beyond. And even if that was to happen anywhere, then those numbers will not tally with the biometric voter transmission figures that will be given. And finally, let me say, yes, it is not possible. There is a possibility that the number of ballots cast for president will differ from the total cumulative votes for their constituencies. I am saying there is a possibility because I want to give a perfect example where I know and I involved. In the last general election in Meru, I ran on a TNA ticket. TNA didn't have a candidate for senator. I was fighting Kiraitu Murungi. We were not in the same lineup. The other candidate was called, who was Gitobu Manyara. I did not vote for the Senate. I did not cast my ballot because my ideology and the code were not in tandem.
Yeah, but the clarification to that statement is that even though there can be that variance, it cannot exceed the total number of registered voters. Really, that's the point.
No, there is even a more fundamental issue. Our position is that whether or not you vote for a candidate, you are given 6 papers in respect of the 6 candidates for whom we are going to vote. And if you vote for a candidate, you will of course put the ballot paper in the ballot box in respect of the candidates, whether governor, whether MP, or those other candidates. If there is a ballot paper you've not used, the law also requires that they be placed somewhere. You don't walk away with them. In fact, it is a criminal offense. So that ultimately, when the amount or number of papers used are considered, you will find the totals in terms of the used and unused equaling the number of papers that were actually given. What we have about 2013 is that you don't have any unused papers in respect of these other candidates, and remember there are 5 of them across the nation, coming to 2 million. In fact, you don't have any. So it is an obvious case of a top-up. And of course, that is the fear we are talking about. The possibility of ballot stuffing is not anything new. But number 2, remember we had made a decision that we would go electronic. And let me assure you, if this election system were to be electronic, our fears about who is printing ballot papers, other than the cost to our people, would not be a bother. But you also know that moves were made to make it possible for us to go into a manual voting system in particular instances. Now you essentially open up the system from the more integrity-based electronic voter identification to a situation where you can open it up to the ghost, the dead, and those non-existent voters, and voter stuffing as before. So if these worries were not there, we would not be talking. What we are saying is that I agree with my brother Lituri, that if we have worries around an electoral process, it does not hurt for us to sit and interrogate what they are. And if it is good for the country, as I believe we should agree, this worry should be addressed so that we move together. We address them. It is wrong to go saying we are into propaganda. In fact, let me tell the people of Kenya that if there is an election NASA has been more sure of winning, there has not been any other than this one.
All right. Michael Agwanda is with us. He's our political analyst. Michael, I'll allow you just to first generally respond to the issue surrounding the award on the printing of the ballot papers.
I want to thank the two gentlemen who are members of parliament, and I believe they've been through this process until where it is today. But I have to say that IBC seem to be calling for a lot of criticism for their own mistakes. I want to I'm happy with the way Honorable Kaluma has enumerated the process under which these tenders were awarded, and after that even up to the court level and even up to the direct nomination. I mean direct award of the tender to Al Ghurair. I will say this: if IBC wanted to play safe in this case, they needed to call on the two aisles of the competitive divides for the presidential aspirants that we have, and that is Jubilee and NASA. They needed to bring them together and agree that we have a hiccup here. The hiccup is a time frame. We have a short time that we may not be able to practically open this up for everybody to bring their tenders here. And for that reason, we may want to go for either a restricted tendering process or a direct direct tender to a specific printing firm that perhaps has the experience that everybody knows that will be given this opportunity to print for us ballot papers. You asked the question today whether there is an evidence. I can tell you, and I've just read through the Star a newspaper today, and it is clearly enumerated how the president and his entourage went to Dubai and met this family, the specific family that is running the Al Ghurair printing firm, and how in turn they also brought a group of commerce business leaders to this country, who in turn met the president, and in turn, in fact, subsequently also the CEO of IBC also got to meet them.
Right, Michael, that's not the evidence.
That is not the evidence, but I'm just saying
that's the claim. Separate the two.
I have not had Jubilee coming out and criticizing and saying, look, this is not the truth. But if this could be the possibility that actually this transaction and this meeting took place, then we have a serious credibility issue on IBC conducting the election. There are many issues that we need to look at here.
Conducting the entire election?
Practically,
or do we have or is it a concern specifically on the award of this tender?
Remember, the ballot papers is what indicates whether somebody votes for an individual or not. And so this is the most critical place of the election. The most critical place of the election is the names of the competitors being in that ballot paper. Right. And that ballot paper is what everybody will be given to vote for their candidate. And I will say this: if we went for a restricted tendering process, which I thought would have been the best, perhaps having 3 or 4 people that have a track experience of printing these ballot papers for this country in the past, they will have agreed on a neutral person or a neutral printing firm to print, will not have had this issue. But because they awarded it directly, there are questions that need to answer. But IBC has not also come out very clearly and told the public why they specifically awarded this tender to this specific firm that they've had issues with up to the court level. Literally, the court ruled that this tender needed to be taken away from them, but they still had it through direct appointment or direct application. And if that is the case, that they needed to do that, why didn't they come out in public and involve everybody, including the Human Rights Watch group, including the Transparency International, including the observers, to say that this is the reason why we did this?
And that is a valid point, Michael, but because we're running out of time, I just want to move you along to the logical conclusion of this. So in your responses, you've also talked about the fact that if IBC was to claim that this is because of time, and needing to expedite this process, that they had to go the direct way, and that they would need to, be very open and transparent about where it is they picked this particular firm. We've heard IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba yesterday say that this a new attempt to block this printing firm Al Ghurair from printing the papers would make it, quote, impossible to hold the general election, obviously playing on the issue of time, less than 60 days to the poll. Do you think that is a bit of a stretch in terms of his assessment of IEBC's ability to get a fresh tendering process out and get these papers done in time?
That's not a reason enough. It's not a reason enough to award a tender to a firm that has had issues with the other competitors. It's not a reason enough to say we are going to ignore the presidential aspirants and the divides of the political parties who are very key in this process, and so we're going to make a decision as IBC. Remember, IBC is serving this country. They are serving both NASA and they're serving Jubilee, which is the government now. And they're also serving the electorates that are waiting out there. They're not they are aspirants, but they're voters. And so what we needed from IBC is to have done a consultative meeting with all the stakeholders and agree on a firm that will be, of course, agreeable to everybody else. Not necessarily saying that it will go through a long tendering process, but the same leeway they had of giving direct tender to a firm is the same leeway they will have to sit all these people together and agree on somebody that will be agreeable to everybody else. That will not have created the suspicion that NASA is having today. And let me tell you, this is very legitimate, and IBC has to come out of it with very, very strong evidence as to why they did that.
All right. We just want to move gears slightly on to that issue of the elections, even as we wind up this topic. And the first clip, you will recall that we played to you, was of the president, saying that, he is willing to concede defeat should Kenyans choose to vote a different way than they did in the last election. And he put, a challenge to the NASA flag bearer and to all his competitors, saying that let them be prepared to say the same without any preconditions. And obviously we've heard from NASA always attaching, the NASA leader Raila Odinga, always attaching that precondition of, accepting poll loss to the electoral system. It's not a blanket acceptance that he would concede defeat. So let me start with you, Peter, on that. Is that a bit of doublespeak on the part of your coalition and your party leader? Should not the fact that accepting the results of an election be a plain statement that isn't riding on other preconditions?
And we have the last voter listing numbers across the nation following the last mass voter registration. And we know the number of votes our strongholds in Western Kenya has, the number of votes our stronghold in Nyanza has, the number of votes our strongholds in Lower Eastern has, the number of votes our stronghold in Coast Province and Nairobi have. And we know how we stand with Jubilee. On the look of those voter listing or the voter numbers across the country, we know where we are as a coalition in terms of winning this election. So what we are insisting on is free, fair, transparent and credible elections. And we are saying, and that if we have that type of election, the elections can only be won by NASA. So to calm the society and the nation, let me say it openly here, that NASA will accept the results of the elections if it wins, because that can only be the result of free and fair elections.
Don't we need to hear that from your flag bearer?
I think that he has said times without number. If we win, we will ultimately accept the results.
And if you lose?
If we lose in an election which is not free and fair,
of conceding.
There is no conceding an election which is not free and fair. And I've told you, Anne, that a free, fair, credible election in 2017 can only take NASA to power.
I'm sure, Mifika, you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I've seen
so don't be quiet now.
Anne, I've seen many times that, NASA has been, for quite some time, trying to prepare ground to reject the outcome of the election. To me, it's not surprising, because I think it's completely a Sunday for me when I hear the advisor of the NASA principal, Kaluma, saying that they can only accept if they win. One question I would ask is, what will be the basis for them to go for the election if they are sure they have already won the election? I won't tell him that why people go out campaigning to sell their agenda is because there is that room of persuading voters to find that Team A is better than Team B. So I think that's a wrong assumption, and I can tell you from where I sit, because anybody going for election has that confidence I am going to win. It's the wrong assumption, and I think Kenyans should be listening to these leaders and understand that these people are not for peaceful elections, are not people that wish Kenya well. Finally, let me also say this, Anne. When I listened to what Mr. Honorable Raila Odinga was saying about the issue of ballot papers and why we are discussing the issue of tender, and honestly, the printing of ballot papers, the company printing will not determine who will win the election. And if Jubilee was to have issues with the management of the elections, from where I sit, we will be saying, or we will be the ones that will be complaining about unfairness, because the law says the returning officer of the presidential election will be the chairman of the IEBC. That's the returning officer. We know the returning officer comes from Western. We know the CEO comes from Western or that region, which is predominantly NASA. We are the people that should be.
Are you saying those officials are compromised?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to put a case for Kenyans to listen, to understand that if we were to have any complaint, we are the people that should have been making complaining, because the only person who will clear the president of this country will be Chepkati. And if what Conde is saying is something to go by, because they know the ideas, and Kaluma wants us to understand that anybody registered in Western or in Chai will be voting Conde, then we shouldn't be very afraid. But we are not, because we believe the law and the system and the institutions that are there will ensure a free, fair, transparent elections, and will be able to go to the people of Kenya, including Siaya, including Nyanza and Coast, and tell them we are better. The future of the country is more secure with the Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency and William Ruto than being in NASA. So I want to really call upon the Kenyan, the NASA brigade to understand this country is greater than them. It doesn't matter who wins the election, as long as the process is free and fair, and the interests of the Kenyan people are more paramount than the safety and security of this country. Is not about one individual.
Yeah.
We do not want a situation where we ban Kenya because somebody says I must be president.
But you know,
if Uhuru lost to Raila Odinga in that president, I will be happy. I will say I will support the NASA presidency, because it's the will of the people of Kenya that have meant that the people of Kenya have decided so and so should be our president. I wouldn't say that, please don't accept the elections. And I'm happy with what the president said. His history is known for accepting or conceding defeat. Please, Raila and Kaluma, kindly be prepared for any outcome, and that's why we are in competition.
And let me put that question to Peter directly, because what you have said, that we will, if we win the elections, then we will accept the results of the election. But if the election, is not free and fair, then you cannot accept the results of the election. And that if it is free and fair, that the only outcome can be NASA wins. Surely, sir, that is an irresponsible statement to make. You get into a political contest knowing that it could go either way, and a free and fair election might very well mean that you win or you lose. So shouldn't the premise of accepting an election result be purely that you will accept the outcome of the polls as long as the process is transparent, and not to say that if the process is transparent, then its obvious result is that NASA would win?
And you have gone around it, but ultimately said what I was saying.
No, I haven't said what you're saying. What you are saying is that a free and credible election will give the result of a NASA win. And I am saying that a free and credible election could give any result depending on the will of the people. Those are not the same things.
And I'm telling you that elections are based on numbers, and we know our numbers. And we have said we are 10 million plus strong. And I've told you where those numbers are. And what I'm saying is that if elections are free and fair, the result it will yield is a confirmation of the numbers I'm talking about. In which case, we will, accept and we will be very happy. But if it is not free and fair, then both yourself and Miteka agree with me that then that election result should be rejected. I mean, what business would we have accepting the outcome of an election?
Peter, you're being a little cheeky on this program. Just minutes ago you said that a free and fair election will result in a NASA win.
Based on the numbers I told you
but
about.
sir, you do not have a crystal ball to say that in the areas that you've mapped out, each single individual will vote the way you expect.
I don't know how to say it, Anne, but I'm telling you,
you're being cheeky.
And what I'm telling you is that this election is already determined. We simply need a free and fair process for that determination to be shown to Kenyans on 8th of August.
That isn't what you said, Peter. That isn't what you said minutes ago, and we can play back the tape.
That's why I referred you to the numbers. I'm not talking from nowhere. I've told you that the lines are drawn in these elections. We know where our strongholds are. We already know how they are going to vote. We know where Jubilee stands with them. And I'm telling you, instead of debating this, put the numbers on the screen and you'll know a free and fair election on August 8th can only result in another win.
Peter, because we want to be reasonable, and you, sir, are a lawyer, so let's just be reasonable in this discussion. Even if it was Jubilee saying, we've heard them say that they are 40 million strong, that they're 70%. Even if they were the ones putting this allegation, my question would remain the same. You do not have a crystal ball to say that those 10 million will actually vote on this particular day and predict that. So this election is not yet done. It will only be done once each and every Kenyan who is registered to vote shows up and votes. So neither side, not yourselves, not Jubilee, can say because of our numbers it is obvious who will win.
And as a leader, let me say something for the sake of the nation. That we will not accept the results of an election that is not rigged. I think it is a better way of saying what I'm saying. We will accept results of elections which are free, fair, transparent and credible. If those ideals do not embrace or undergird the elections we are going for, we will reject those results.
Well, Peter, I appreciate you self-correcting on this program. We are going to take a break from that topic. Sorry, Mithika, I don't have the time. We need to catch up with a bit of news even as we get to the top of the hour. You'll remember, of course, that in the first hour we reported to you about this massive inferno that took place in London in a 27-floor high-rise apartment in West London, and the blaze raged for several hours. And now, according to the Guardian newspaper giving us an update, a number of people have died after this fire engulfed a tower in the West Block. The fire broke out shortly before 1 a.m. on Wednesday at Grenfell Tower in Latimer Road near Notting Hill. The tower is at least 24 stories high and contains some 120 apartments. 200 firefighters have been tackling the blaze with 40 engines. London Ambulance Services said that they were called at 1:29 a.m. and 20 crews raced to the scene. The London Fire Brigade have confirmed that there have been, quote, a number of fatalities. It is also confirmed that 30 patients have been taken to 5 London hospitals. There have been multiple reports of people trapped in this blaze. A Guardian reporter at the scene said at least one man could be seen at a window waving and calling for help. Streets around the tower have also been sealed off and residents in their houses told to move out. Falling debris also caused nearby flats to be evacuated. The London Fire Brigade have called it an unprecedented incident, saying there is no known cause for the blaze at the moment. So that being an updated report on this massive inferno near Notting Hill. The fact that we've also heard from the London Mayor Sadiq Khan saying that this is, quote, a major incident that has been declared, and now the confirmation of fatalities certainly bringing to the fore that lives have been lost. We do not know how many, but it appears certainly to be a significant number in a London disaster, perhaps one that the city has not seen in recent years. We'll remember, of course, the United Kingdom has been seeing, a series of unfortunate incidences, and this one in particular in London causing a lot of anxious moments this morning when we can confirm from reports from the Guardian newspaper that there are in fact fatalities in this incident that has been touted as unprecedented by the London Fire Brigade. We'll be bringing you updates on this and other stories as we continue with Citizen Extra well into its third hour. Stay with us.